Welcome to the Family Pictures Podcast. I'm here with Jim Groom, and I'm Michael Branson Smith. Welcome.
And I'm Jim Groom with Michael Branson Smith.
Yeah. So, Jim, can you say something for me?
Boom, boom, boom.
Real quick. Betty Botter bought a batch of bitter butter.
Betty bought batter.
No, Betty Botter.
Betty Botter.
Bought a batch of bitter butter.
Bought a batch of bitter butter. Does that mean I'm drunk?
Or how about Betty Botter bought a batch of baby bugger rubber bumpers?
Baby Botter bought a batch of baby bugger rubber bumpers.
There you go. Good job.
I did that good.
Yeah, you did pretty well.
I'm sober, officer.
We both have been for years, right?
I'm doing this podcast sober.
We are doing probably the oldest film, right, that we've ever done, I think. This is
absolutely
first.
I think that's a definite.
This is Make Way, and this is something that Jim and I are discovering and doing a film from 1937, Make Way for Tomorrow. We know nothing about movies.
Nothing. Once you go to the 30s, you're like, I don't know shit about film history. This
is the film directed by Leo McCarey. Oh, watch your crackling there, Jim. That's on. I can hear that like crazy. Stop moving around with your snacks there. Uh-oh, now I can't hear you. What happened?
Is that good?
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you. See, this is what the audio engineering I was talking before the show, how I almost became an audio engineer. In last episode, we had some clicking, and I was like, what the fuck's Jim's mic doing? And now here he is. He's like playing with some piece of plastic like it's no problem.
You were like Gene Hackman in The Conversation, looking for the bug in the apartment, like ripping up floors, like, where is this bug? Where is this? I was like, what is going on, Michael? Are you all right?
Yeah. No, I'm definitely hearing things. So we are doing an episode about a movie here that we know very little about this history, this era film. And this is directed by Leo McCarey. And it was actually quite a pleasure to research him because in that era, he is like on the same level as Capra, Hitchcock, Ford. Like he is an all-star director. He literally paired Laurel and Hardy, in their first picture, and went on to make a half a dozen shorts with them. What they did in this era, they made comedy shorts. They weren't like feature films. They were like 20-minute films, and they were spooled together in sequence in daytime picture watching in the theaters. And so he also went on to make the Marx Brothers' best film, Duck Soup. And so he has a lot of power in the industry, and he's working for Paramount in the time. And he convinces the studio head, what's his name? Kukor?
Zucker. But I'm probably not pronouncing it right. Adolf Zucker.
Adolf Zucker, who's like one of the famous studio heads of the era. He convinces him to let him make this film, which they both kind of know isn't going to make money. Because this is 1937. The United States has, for the most part, begun to very much recover economically from the Great Depression, which was a worldwide economic calamity, in which that saw like GDPs of countries decline in like multiple tens of percentages. So like unemployment rates of 30% or more. And apparently in my, half-assed research, this is an era where they're down to like 15% unemployment, which right now would be insane.
Exactly. Things are good.
But it would still be nuts. And, they had actually retrenched a little bit of the stimulus at the time, and it caused a recession. So when this film's released, this is a time when financially people are not doing very well. And it's a story about financial stress ultimately. And so, in that context, what's so interesting is there's also another film that McCarey makes. And in the same year, this is when directors are like, they're part of the system and they're just cranking stuff out. And he makes the film The Awful Truth with Cary Grant. And it's Cary Grant's kind of like breakout role. And he wins the Academy Award for Best Director. But what's so interesting is in his speech, apparently, he said, thank you for the award, but you gave it to me for the wrong picture.
Yeah, this is great. Yeah,
Because
classic.
he recognizes Make Way for Tomorrow is the quote unquote serious film in a time when serious films really didn't happen. Right? This
Yeah,
is a
and
time when people wanted to escape.
and also like the critics recognized it, and so like
Yeah.
he got major critical acclaim for both films, but in particular for Make Way for Tomorrow. And the thing is because of the ending and because of the kind of, how would you say, tone of the film, they knew, given the economic distress of most of the country, that it wasn't going to be a success, to your point, but they still made it anyway. And it's a kind of a good example of just how much power and how respected Leo McCarey was. And what I find fascinating, we talked about this early at the beginning of it, but Leo McCarey now is this amazing director who kind of invents the screwball comedy and makes it, super popular, going from the teens to the 20s into the 30s, where he kind of comes into his own and is considered really an auteur, like you said, with Hitchcock and Ford and the rest of them. But the other piece there is, right, he has a precipitous decline after that. And he gets into a car accident. He kind of represents for the UAC committee. While he doesn't name names, he basically, is a supporter of this kind of anti-communist sensibility. And as a result, he's quickly erased from, maybe it's just the timing, maybe it's not, but in some ways, his name becomes a bit of mud. And historically, this Criterion version that you have and that we're watching is actually, I think, an attempt to almost like resuscitate his career and talk a bit about like, this is a lost great film and director.
That's absolutely true. I mean, what was interesting is to see, like, when you would Google Make Way for Tomorrow reviews, everything is from 2010 onward. And it must have been the timing of the Criterion release, basically. And this film is recovered seriously. And, you get suddenly for the first time, like Roger Ebert reviewing this. And there's these two wonderful featurettes that came with the Blu-ray. I had to buy the Blu-ray to get this film. This is one of the films where I was like, I want this. It's not streaming anywhere for sure. And so I get the Blu-ray, and it included an interview with Peter Bogdanovich, the famous director.
Who's great.
Who's wonderful. And his story, my favorite story, is he talks about how I never knew this about Peter Bogdanovich. He was very much a film historian. In many ways, he spoke a lot about speaking with many directors from this era and how much they influenced us. It reminds me of Cameron Crowe and his deep dive with William Wilder. Have you ever looked at that book? That book's amazing. He did the equivalent of the Hitchcock Truffaut book. Cameron Crowe did this with William Wilder. Some Like It Hot, the Stalag 17 director. And anyway, so Peter Bogdanovich, he mentions bringing up the film in conversation with Orson Welles and wondering if he'd ever seen it. And Orson Welles responds, "Oh my God, that's the saddest movie ever made. It would make a stone cry." And it's like, and this is the thing that about this particular film is it was unrelenting. It wasn't. Even now, we always want our happy ending for the most part in a Hollywood film. And generally speaking, when it doesn't give us our happy Hollywood ending, now I'm doing my bitter botter.
Exactly. My happy Hollywood happy ending.
We tend to move away from it. It's kind of as a broad audience, right? It's not uncommon for that to happen. And so the film does not do well, even though, as you said, the critics are like, there's stories of critics literally crying during this film, but they're at the same time telling people, don't go, it's too sad. And so what is the story here? Why are people so miserable in this movie? And it's a story of a couple who are affectionately just described initially as Ma and Pa, but we learn their real names are Bark and Lucy, and they're played. Wait, I'm getting my things set up here. They're played by Victor Moore and Beulah Bondi, both of them for the most part. Well, I would say Victor Moore had more of a leading man's role in comedies, but not a ton. Beulah Bondi, who made pictures and appeared in television all the way into her like 80s, and so they're both playing older than they were. She was only 50, and she was. He was about 60 and she was only 50, and they wore aged makeup. And Peter Bogdanovich spoke about how since it was black and white, you could get away with that.
Yeah,
like if it was in
right.
color, they would look like they were in like, cartoonish, masks practically. And so, they play the unlucky parents that get caught up in the Great Depression. He's lost his job. Go ahead.
One thing about Beulah Bondi. So, she goes on, like you said, she's a great character actor. And one of the things is she often played these mothers and these older mothers.
Yeah.
She played them in many Ford films. And she was convinced she had the role for the Grapes of Wrath. So convinced
right.
that she went and bought an old jalopy and moved out to Bakersfield and was living with migrant workers just to get a sense of it. So when it was announced that she didn't get the role, she was devastated. And the woman who did get the role, whose name I'm forgetting right now, went on to win Best Actress or Best Supporting Actress for
Best
that
supporting
role.
actress, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So but that's an interesting story. Like she was so convinced she had the role that she basically moved out to Bakersfield and started practicing well before he announced it. But anyway, I just thought that was crazy.
And ironically, as a woman who played all these mothers and grandmothers, she never married, never had children.
Yeah. And they talk a bit about that. I mean, I did the old Wikipedia research, but they talk a bit about like that was the hardest decision she ever made, but she never regretted it either. And it was interesting. Like she's an interesting figure, I think.
Yeah.
One who, again, watching these old films brings up these whole entire lives of actors and actresses and directors and producers that, most of us don't know about, given we came up with, movies of the 60s, 70s, 80s at most. We had to do deep dives to get to the 30s, 40s, and 50s often, and that would happen in college or thereafter. So, it's great doing these old films just because you learn a ton about these actors and actresses and everything else.
And there's so much more out there, and it's so accessible to learn about. I mean, I can't even imagine being in college back in the 90s and trying to learn anything about these people. It'd be so fucking difficult. Like weeding your way through a library and microfiche to find one random review.
She tried out for Grapes of Wrath, where you'd never know that.
Out. Yeah, no, you never would find that. And so, this is the story of a family that's Pa or Bark has lost his job, and their house, they still had a mortgage at the time, and they've fallen behind in their payments, and they're going to lose the house. And the setting, we're introduced to the setting. It's actually kind of very bucolic. It's, even though it's winter time, there's a white picket fence, and they have there's smoke coming out of the chimney. And when we enter the home, it's this beautiful hearth, and Pa's got this big throne-like chair that he sits in as appropriately as the patriarch of the house, and Ma stands by, and his portrait is above the fireplace, and it seems wonderful. And the four older kids. Oh, and I should say, we haven't even said this, which is very funny. This is the first picture in which we're doing a series on generational conflict, effectively, with a focus primarily on older children managing their elderly adults, parents for the most part. And this is what does that sound like? Is that wrong?
I'm just thinking through. I mean, how could we not have done a film about generational conflict?
I mean, I think we have, like, if you think about like The Breakfast Club as a film about generational conflict, but it's about teenagers and their parents ultimately. And I think we did like a bunch of things in the vein of teenagers and parents, but this one is a specific.
So you're saying about like kids and their older parents.
Correct.
The
older
first one that.
Kids.
Yes.
Yeah, this is our first one where it's about kids that are in their 40s at least, for the most part, or late 30s, and their older parents. Because in this film,
there is a reason for that, I think. And if you want to know, I'll tell you.
No, I don't want to know, Chad.
That's what I thought, but I'm going to tell you anyway.
Okay,
I
tell
think
me
that
about
is because, and this is one of the things that critics talk about with this film and in general, is making films about old people is not very fashionable, right? Like
it.
it
No,
doesn't happen that much.
and older people don't go to pictures, so they're not anymore.
They're
They're like
not.
they barely leave their homes, so they're a tough audience to get to head out to the theaters too.
I didn't even think about that perspective.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So yeah, I mean, so we're also introduced in this living room to four of the five children. We learn they have five children, and one daughter lives in California. Her name's Addie, and she's never seen in the entire picture.
I
And we're
love that
introduced.
detail. I have to
Yeah,
say, like that detail is one of my favorites. Being a kid of a family of seven who lives in Italy, and one of my brothers lives in California. There's always that sense of those missing children, and as a missing child for most of my adult life, I feel seen in this movie, even though I'm not and I'm invisible. But like it was really kind of a nice touch, and they're always trying to get the parent to go with this missing child who's
right.
somewhere else far away. And I really like this about this film. It's another beautiful detail of this film for me.
Yeah, yeah, a film of many details, many which we'll discuss in that. And this is the last McCary thing I'll bring up, and it's in part due to McCary was a innovator on set in that he really was comfortable with improvisation with his actors. And he spoke, I think Bogdanovich and the Giddin, who's a critic who did the other, they both spoke about this, how he was a quote unquote actor's director, right? And he would allow the characters to come up with their environment together. So that created a situation where they described like it prevented contrivances, right? There wasn't a false kind of interaction between the characters of mom and
Yeah.
pa. And there's some of my favorite stuff is towards the end where pa is cracking jokes with his wife, basically, right?
Yeah, it's great.
It's really wonderful. And you imagine like how that probably came out of this improvisational character approach. And so we're introduced to the four children. Probably the most famous is Thomas Mitchell, who plays George Cooper, the oldest son. And Thomas Mitchell I even know who Thomas Mitchell is because he's from It's a Wonderful Life. But he was also in Gone with the Wind and Stagecoach and High Noon.
High
And he's
Noon,
the
exactly.
first male actor to get he didn't get an EGOT because he didn't sing, but he got he didn't get a Grammy, but he got an Oscar, he got a Tony, and he got an Emmy. So he didn't get a
Is that called like a triple crown? Is that what they call that?
yeah,
What
it's
do
like
they
a
call
triple
that?
crown, like, but there's
Yeah.
the EGOT, which would include also if you got a Grammy, right?
Wow.
It's a joke from a TV show.
Okay, I don't get it. Damn it. I feel so left out. But I think Thomas Mitchell is great. I love him.
Yeah.
His presence is just, and he comes as this 30s presence. And there's something about this film and films from the 30s in general, I think, although I might be overstating, where they always feel a bit staged, right? Like you always feel that you're almost watching a play. And in the beginning of this film, it starts out like that. You got the younger brother coming in with drinks for everybody, and then you have all the brothers and sisters on the couch, and you follow in the one brother into the room, and then the kind of, exposition happens about, okay, children, we lost our house. And it feels very play-like, as do many, many scenes in the beginning of this film, which I think is interesting. And I'll talk about it later, but that's one of the notices. And that's one of the things about 30s films that I think it's hard for the modern watcher or the modern viewer to kind of get used to, is the fact that film was transitioning away in some ways in the 20s and 30s from the stage to its own form. And people like Ford and Hitchcock and McCary, I think, helped revision that and reimagine the form itself. And so it's interesting how this starts very much like a stage play, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny, like having been someone who studied film from a production standpoint for a period of time. That was in large part due to the equipment too. Like to record sound, there was no re-recording of sound. Like everything is, they call it ADR, automatic dialogue replacement, where all basically 95% of dialogue is re-recorded in the studio so that the bad sound of a noisy set is allowed. It doesn't matter. So especially if you're like in an action sequence and people are talking and they're in their helicopters, blah, blah, blah. You had to be near the microphone, and you had to, and the equipment was ginormous. Like there was no portable audio recorders. It was the size of like a refrigerator, this multi-track recorder, and same thing with the cameras as well. So a lot of the constraints are born out of the technical constraints, but it was also because of the fact that we were moving to the quote unquote talkies of the era, right? The silent film era was known as being more free because they were focused on just the visual. And it's because as they moved into the spoken word, it became more like a play, as you said, and that was why. And then it lost its, and Hitchcock and some of the best filmmakers were always trying to push that, but that wasn't McCary's thing. He's of the era, he's out of the comedy vein, and the comedy vein is focused on the joke and the story and the actors, and his visual storytelling isn't particularly complex in this film at all, which isn't surprising given the nature of the script and the story he's trying to tell. But anyway, we are introduced to the family. And yes, what's interesting is George is the oldest responsible one, supposedly, but he has two sisters, Nellie and
Nora?
Oh, I didn't order that. Nellie and Cora. Sorry.
Cora,
It's Nellie
yeah.
and Cora and Robert, the kind of probably youngest one who seems to be a mess, and though it's never named.
No one's depending on him for anything.
Yeah. And it's very interesting because Nellie has a husband and they live, you get a sense like the suburbs of New York. And the other thing is we learn very quickly that they're all basically the suburbs of New York, whether it's Connecticut, New Jersey, upstate New York, or the Westchester, whatever it is, but it's New York centric.
Long Island.
Yeah, Long Island, maybe. Have people moved to Long Island yet by the 30s?
No, not really. It was still farmland.
Yeah, I think it mostly is.
Yeah.
And so, everybody immediately, they discover that they have no place to go. And so that's the construct of this film. And this is the initial tension and this is one of these ideas where no one's the bad guy here necessarily, right? Like it's out of the realities of the moment, George and his wife Anita and his daughter Rhoda live in the city, and they're upper middle class, making their way out of the Depression, basically. And we learn soon enough that Anita is making extra money teaching bridge in their apartment, which is a really nice apartment, but it's probably part of what allows them to afford the bills. I think she says as much it's one point. Anita does, and so they couldn't take on both their parents because it's like a 2-bedroom apartment basically. And, they have their bedroom and their daughter's in the other room, and the other room there's another single bed. And that's what leads to where Ma ends up going. Ma's going to stay with George and his family. And poor Bark is kind of shoved down into the suburbs with Cora and his husband, who seems like he's a dude. But the whole point is there's this promise that Nellie, who's married to her, is alluded to, is someone who has more resources, will take them on after Nellie convinces her husband to make it happen. And so it's only going to be temporary, Jim. They're going to be separated. But meanwhile, this is a couple that has been together for 50 years. And this is part of the tragedy of the film is like, these are two people that mean everything to one another, and they have from all we can tell. I mean, it's not like it's focused on in the beginning, the marriage and how good or bad it is, but they seem good and they're pulled apart. And that's the real crux of this film is how everybody's just managing. Like they are pieces of furniture, and literally there's the creaky rocking chair that makes its way into the really nice appointed apartment of George and his family, and as well as the portrait, which becomes like a piece of comedy as they try to get rid of it, and everybody thinks like, oh, you want to put it here? Wonderful.
Well, it's interesting too that you bring up the silent films, and I'm going to go back with one more piece from McCary. Sure. So McCary, the other thing that we learn about him is that his dad was a boxing promoter, and that his dad was a real big part of his life, and they were super close as he was with his mom. But in 36, his dad dies, and he was making another film, which he got sick during making, and his dad died while he was making it, so he couldn't even go to the funeral. And I think they were super close. So this film, according to critics like Giddens and Bogdanovich, was his homage to his parents, particularly his dad. And it starts with a big leaf about, like, this time in life, and it gives you a little lecture, and let's go back to that ancient saying. And it starts with this great one: honor thy father and thy mother. And
it's from the Bible.
It's from the Bible, exactly. And that's how we start this. And then all the setup you just gave our amazing listeners actually is the general, but this movie is a movie of details about these interrelationships in a family between these parents who feel like they in many ways are abandoned by their kids, or at least disregarded, and the kids who feel very much like they don't have the time or the space or the energy to deal with these parents. And it's a very relatable story, right? It really is super modern in that regard. And I think that's another reason why it is finding new life now, is because it's kind of a situation we, as, I don't know, I can't even say just Americans. My wife is going through this right now in Italy. This is kind of a universal thump, if you will, of what do we do at this point in life. And so I thought it was interesting that McCary was dealing this as an honor to his parents, but at the same time, can we honor our parents the way we need to, is a big question of this story, is actually at the center of it.
Yeah, it is, because it's and what he does, McCary does so well, is he plays both sides, because this is a big part of the story. It's like the parents come with their baggage, and their neediness and their constant trying to be part of the social life that they don't fit into. And at the same time, the kids don't want to really make space for them, as you've already described, and they don't know how to navigate this and the guilt trips that come out of it. I mean, and this is something that I'm literally dealing with. Like, my wife and I upended our entire lives to make space for her mother, who's now going to be living with us in upstate New York. And it was just necessary. She was, this incredibly independent woman who's a painter and has managed a farm and with horses and done so much. But now there's some cognitive stuff we're not 100% sure. But at the same time, we feel lucky that we've been able to kind of just in time support her and bring her into these places and new spaces. And it's going, well as it could, but it's also still stressful. Like, this is a new, unexpected stress in adults' lives. Like, we're both those, it is this idea of like, oh, we're going to be empty nesters. Yay. We have all this recovered time. Our kids are finally going to college, and wow, look at all this time we're going to have just the two. We'll get to reconnect as a couple and spend this time hiking and walking.
Just the two of us. We'll make sandcastles in the sky.
And it's so funny. There's this, when I was looking it up, there's this poster art of the film, and it's so interesting because it makes this. Wait, I want to bring it up. It has this art where there's two versions. One is more of what the film's really like, but this other one is like more of a gauzy image of two characters that don't exist of a man holding a woman who's dressed in this dress,
and they're like doing a dance move, right?
Yeah, and they're making out, and the quote on the line is, "They want to live their own lives. Can you blame them?" Right? Like, it's like, do they really have to be responsible? And this is not the story, and this is not the story that McCary's selling. And what's also interesting is you see the older parents in the bottom left corner, like kind of shrinking in the corner, like looking up really gravely at them, like, oh, we don't fit and we should. And so the poster, clearly is saying that the parents are the problem. But that's what's so great about the film is McCary doesn't do that. He says, nope, there is something for everybody here that is causing this to happen, right? And that we've mentioned it. Social Security Act has only been passed 2 years before, and I think it's Giddens, the critic, who speaks of this the most in the featurette, how Social Security and the idea of aging parents and their financial straits, that dire financial straits that so many were in the country, was the same thing as the conversation about healthcare in our day, right?
Yeah.
It's like it is that dire of financial pressure. And so the Social Security Act had just passed, but it obviously isn't going to fix the situation immediately. And that's the situation they're in. And these are these kids that are trying to, and it's very American to be super independent, and you go on your own way. You leave the house, as Jim Groom did, and never came back. He went to California. He now is off in Italy.
He won't come home. Where's Jim Groom? His parents are aging. He's nowhere to be found. Let his sister take care of everything. What a prick. Right. Yeah, there's that whole story too.
Yeah, the guilt is real, right? Whether it comes from the siblings, and there's, very early on in the story of Moss setting up in George's house with Rhoda and Anita, and I think there's two of the best scenes of the film come in that apartment. Anita has called, or is it George has called Nellie, because they're trying to go out to dinner, and Lucy is laying it on thick. It's like, you guys have left me alone before. I'll be okay. You don't need to worry about me. And George is like, oh my God, are you killing me? We just want to go out to dinner. And they have their house, maid, Mamie, who's similarly like hiding from Ma, who's like, I just want some time to myself, right? It's like, you can't go anywhere without her just saying like, hey, and the context is understandable in that she doesn't have a social space anymore. She doesn't have her husband. And that's I think one of the more interesting tensions of this film is like, what does a person do when they have no social space to exist in, and how to and not knowing how to operate in that social space, because it's so unfamiliar.
And the brilliance, too, of this film, and we'll see others like it, but this one is unique in that they're intentionally separated. There's this real sense in this movie that no one has space, right? Space comes at a premium. The other, sister who's living in New York City also has no space. The one who's even living out in the suburbs, he's out on the couch. He doesn't have a bedroom. Like, you get this sense like everybody has just enough space to live, and bringing both on would be impossible. And hence, the rationale for their separation. But it's that separation too that's also not only, crushing the parents and their inability to connect, because they're all they've known for 50 years, and that's their social life is each other. And I think there's a point at which Lucy says that, but it's also the moment of pathos. So there's that great scene when we're with Lucy or Ma, and she's come back from the movies, and she was at her movies with her granddaughter, and her husband calls. And everybody is in. So basically, Anita, it's a great scene. Anita is basically her daughter-in-law, George's wife. She teaches bridge to raise some extra money. And there's always talk about money and making some money. So things are tight, And she basically is really worried that Ma is going to ruin it, because all of these bridge players are in tuxedos and they seem really high class, right?
Yeah.
And so
it's a top dollar session going on here.
Exactly. And so she's like, I hope Ma doesn't ruin it. And Ma gets on the phone and she's yelling, right? Like, because
Mark?
Exactly.
You hear me, Mark? Okay.
It's great because you can see in the background behind her, and this is where there is some beautiful cinematography and filming. She's talking and she's trying to kind of, talk to him, but it's very almost country. And the people behind are like, what the hell? You can just see on this one woman's face, like, who is this bumpkin that I have to listen to while I'm playing bridge, right? And the conversation goes on for another, couple of minutes, at least film wise. And then the next scene, when you look at the mother and everyone behind her, and there's shots actually of the bridge folks around the room, you hear the pathos of her talking to her husband, who she misses desperately, and she's saying, "You better wear your scarf and don't do this." And then everybody in the room now, their whole sentiment has changed dramatically. Right. They feel for her. They're on her side. And within a matter of seconds, the whole pathos of this scene, which could go terribly wrong, and you could be on the sister or the daughter-in-law's side and be like, "Oh, the mother is such a pain in the ass." At the a flip of a switch, everybody is pretty much like, "I understand Ma's situation, and I see how bad it is for her to be separated." It is such an amazing scene.
It is. It's so important, and it's so important because, as you describe, it's both edges of this discomfort, right? The discomfort is real. They're literally just trying to have bridge. This is the bacon that Anita's trying to bring to her family, and it's on the jeopardy. The stakes are actually quite high. For Anita, like you could easily see her losing some people that are like, I don't think I want to go back. It's already described how Rhoda's friends don't want to come by anymore. And so that's real. So the consequences are already understood, that socially, this is the situation is really difficult. But the other side is, so that's the one, it's like, it's real like that. But at the same time, the other side of the edge is the sympathy, the empathy that comes out of nowhere practically. Is hard, and it's not even contrived. And that's the thing that we've talked about, like how McCary walks this line so wonderfully, and it's so difficult to do. And it's really, really important.
And it's true. I mean, it's beautifully done. And on top of that, so you talked about the granddaughter who's feeling it, the wife who's feeling it, George who's feeling it as a result of everyone in this family feeling it. But there's even a moment on top of that where the black housekeeper is basically like, "I have to renegotiate with you, Anita. I don't want to be here at nights. I don't want to be watching her." And she's like, "I'm going to get another job if we don't deal with this." And so like you get it from every angle, and everyone in the house, you can see how their equilibrium has been disturbed, and they don't want it anymore. They want done with it so they can go back to how their life was. And that is a perfect picture. Take it 90 years later and put it in 2026, and you can see that exactly. Like, I don't want my equilibrium disturbed. I want to have that, post kids out of the house moment. I didn't sign up for this. I mean, you could be that one husband, Michael, who's with the other one who's like, "I didn't marry your mother. I married you."
Nellie's husband is a trip. Like, his only line in the whole movie is, that's what she said. It's so fucking awesome.
It's great. And,
it's
relentless
and honest. So. Yeah.
And you know what? Yeah. People get like that, though, in these situations, and they begin to resent it. My sister, who my dad lived with her for 17 years, and God bless her husband, who my dad was a complete prick to, when he was like in his youth, and he felt his he push out his chest. He was not the nicest man to, but when it came to it, he basically dealt with it, and for all of our sakes. And that's a really interesting moment when you think about how you treat people now, because that could come back and bite you in the ass, and that should have come back and bit my dad in the ass. It really should have, but it didn't.
That's I mean, talk about like, this is really, really the deep, intense, this is what family is really about, right? And that's one of that is a portrait. This is a true portrait of tension of the realities of family. And, what's interesting is the first time we see Bark alone. So we've spent a lot of time talking about Ma and
because the movie kind of does spend a lot of time with Ma, a lot more than with Bark.
Sure. But Bark is introduced in a really sympathetic way, and he's found a social partner. Unlike Ma's kind of stuck in the house and has nothing to do, and is kind of going stir crazy and joining in conversations and trying to, bridge. This is like hearts. I actually in college loved playing hearts. oh, I used to give my husband the dirty Dora, the Queen of Spades. Because in Hearts, you pass cards before you start playing a round. Anyway, it's like, I love that. But Bark is so lucky. He's met Mr. Rubens, who kind of runs a local general store, which you also see is right out of his house. He has a storefront that's connected to where he lives. And he's wonderful. And the two of them are like two old men, so happy to have one another's company, right? And like, and they're talking about their kids, and Rubens is like, mine are gone. It's so great. I love it. And it's so sad because like, basically, Bark is like, yeah, same here. Not, because he's his situation is frankly the polar opposite. It's like he's imposing on his kids. He doesn't have his wife, and he doesn't have a hobby like, Rubens describes, I have my violin to play. And so, and Rubens also has a store to keep him financially stable. And so he has none of those things, even though he jokes along with him. And there's so many and talk about details. There's so many wonderful things with Mr. Rubens when like there's this little kid who comes in to like get some gum, and he says, it's over there, go get it yourself. Like he doesn't even get up from sitting by a fireplace in the center of the store, and then the kid comes over to pay for it and he frisks him.
Yeah, to see if he had more. Exactly.
I was like, that's amazing.
I agree. Yeah, he's a wonderful character, Rubens, actually.
Yeah, and go ahead.
I mean, I just think like, so they're having this conversation, and then Pa or Bark leaves. I always want to call him Bert, but Bark leaves, and Rubens goes back into his kitchen because you said the general store's connected to his house, and he's just like, calls his wife, and he keeps calling her, and you're like, did something happen to her? And then she comes out and she's like, why are you bothering me? I'm cooking or whatever. And he's like, I just wanted to see you. I just wanted to know you were there. So good.
And it's because it was preceded by, Bark has broken his reading glasses again, and he reads.
That's right.
Max Rubens reads his letter for him from his wife, and at a certain point, Max can't read it anymore. It's too personal, and it's too hard, to reconcile with that kind of separation, which goes to the moment where he's like, oh my God, thank God I have my wife right here. And she's like so enthralled with him. It's like, you just wanted to see me? Oh, exactly. You're so great. But who are you?
Exactly. But it also, it is a good kind of setup for what ultimately Gary Giddens, who's the scholar who talks on that Blu-ray, who's great. I really love his kind of insights and what he says.
Yeah. And
one of the things he says is, in the end, this movie's a love story. Yeah, and I think there's really like, you see that, especially with these two old guys, one, bemoaning and pining after his wife who's not there, and the other one who's super appreciative when she is there. And also, God forbid you say anything about her chicken soup. He will be on your ass. Like, he's a great character. Anyway,
he's phenomenal. No, we should talk about that, because that's the other side of Bark's existence is the household of Cora. And, we're not introduced to Cora's treatment of an engagement with her father until, basically like 2/3 of the way through the film, because we had seen Bark hanging out with Mr. Rubens, and we're like, oh, this isn't so bad. But now Bark has got a cold, and we see him on the couch, and he's laid up, and Cora is like vacuuming around him, and the husband is sitting in the background trying to like ignore everything going on. Like, he literally gets up in the middle of the scene. I was like, holy shit, he was in the movie. He was in the frame. Like, that's how much he was like, he's trying to avoid being part of this situation, with his father-in-law. And Cora, what did you think of Cora and her treatment of her dad?
It was terrible. I mean, the dad, you come into that scene and the dad's on the couch. The couch is too small for him. He's sick. Like you said, the husband's, camouflaged in the background, and Cora's, briskly, vacuuming with this kind of strange, like, non-electric vacuum, one of those old school pick up your own vacuum stuff. I don't know what it would be called, but anyway, and she's just pissed. she's pissed he's there. She's pissed he has to deal with him. She has to deal with him. And at that point, she's like, oh no, the bell rang. And so she puts on the facade. And there's a lot of this going on where she gets the dad up in his cold feet and his nightgown and runs him into her bed so that the doctor believes that he's now, because for the next shot you see of him, he's all warm and snuggly in the bed. And the fact is, it's like what is real versus what actually they want to show. And that's a great moment for that because, you also understand Cora is another example, a great example that there's not enough space, right? You really feel this tightness of space and the way in which his presence really disrupts their whole life. And that's where it's both sides. Like you can immediately see both sides, but she just doesn't seem like a very pleasant person.
No, and I think it's important because it contrasts like where, you have Anita and Rhoda and George basically going into the other room to talk about their concerns about Ma and like kind of hiding it from there. They're equally, unpleased with the situation, but Cora, it's just right out in front. She's like, the way she treats him is so gruff, and it's like, and Mr. Rubens comes by to pay him a visit, knowing he's sick, and she literally shuts the door on him. It's like she thinks he's a salesman, and she's like, and she slams the door on him, and it's because the doctor says it's fine for him to come in that he comes in, and this leads to the moment where you described, like he's so graciously brought soup that his wife's made, and Cora comes in and it's like, what are you eating? Like it's really gruff. It's like, why are you eating that?
Exactly.
It's like chicken soup. It's good. And it's like, oh, if you get sick from this, and then Mr. Rubens is like, hey, my wife, she makes a good soup. It can be served to kings and queens.
Exactly.
Don't you talk? And I just love that's such a great deal. Like the way it's like, this is the most important people in your life. Fuck you for like talking down about her.
Exactly.
It's like, I will take you out, woman, if you keep this up.
Yeah. And there was a real sense of that, right? Like, and I don't know, and you talked about this where there was some great improvisation on the set. And like he would go and he would play piano until he felt like, he had some sort of on set, he would play piano and then he'd come back and then he'd say, here's what we're going to do. And let's for this scene, this is what we want to get. Let's see what you guys can do with it. And no script and just let them go. And I see some of these scenes, which are really powerful. This one in particular. And I wonder because he seems really pissed, Rubens, and Cora is just great. Like she's just like gruff is the perfect word for her. And she goes on to it. She's like, well, then why don't you have your wife come over and take care of him?
Right.
Rubens like walks out and he's like, we'll call your wife later. And it's just a beautiful scene. It's an amazing scene. And it's just, the daughter coming in and, disrupting two old guys talking about chicken soup, but it's amazing.
Yeah. And it's so important, but it ultimately, it's really important contrast between the siblings and how they're managing their parents. And then you get a sense like the financial stakes are very different. I think, and I don't know, it's so funny. You read like other people's notes and they're describing Cora's husband of not having a job. And I was like, where the fuck did you get that from? Like, I don't know that. I mean, I believe it, but I don't know.
No, they do say it right away. Like he's been out of work for like 13 months.
Okay. And so she's in a much more financially stressed situation. And so it's not surprising that she's taking it out, her anxiety and stress on her father. And, and he's imperfect. And man, the way he treats the doctor is so awesome because that's immediately follows and he doesn't trust him. And he's trying to do this chest examination, to listen to his lungs. And the doctor keeps saying, say 99. It's like, why? He just will not be compliant. It's like, you say
next
90.
time send your father.
You say that word. He won't even. He makes sure he doesn't repeat the question because that, in a sense, would be compliant. It's really funny.
I agree. It was amazing, and I think again. So you have Cora and you have George and you have their situations, and that's what this part of the film really focuses on. But also what's absent is just as important, right? There's the one brother who seems to be a ne'er-do-well and doesn't have even a situation where he could set up the parents. You have
Probably, yeah.
the other sister who's in town, but whose husband will have none of it. So there's that. So those two are out. And then you have the one this far out in California who ultimately agrees to take the dad at least. But like, I love that this film also deals, even if they're not present, their absence makes them present in this family dynamic of who's going to take care of mom and dad. And I love that about this film because I really relate to it, right? Because being an absent presence myself from my mom and my dad, although my mom died earlier and faster, my dad, no. So like there was a real sense of like who's going to take care of dad. And I lucked out. Like I hit the lottery with my older sister. But the fact is that's a real thing. And there's some real tensions and dynamics when you decide to take off, get up and go away. What does that mean for your parents as they get older, especially in systems now where, you know, to go into a retirement house or home is like tens of thousands of dollars, and sometimes like it can get up to 8, 9. You know, my dad was paying like $8,000 a month at the very last part of his life. And like, we were like, are you kidding me? Like, who has that kind of money? You know what I mean?
Well, that's where their Social Security goes now. That's the whole point. And like, you have like families that are hiding their parents' money in trust just so Social Security can't take it all. You know, I mean, it's just so the healthcare system can't take it all. And yeah, no, it's really interesting. I mean, and what's so interesting is like, this is a portrait of technically a relatively healthy, intact family.
Yeah.
Right. You have parents that are married. You have children that have seen success they're also married, and they're struggling mightily. Now, the context economically is the Depression, but this doesn't speak to like families that are more estranged, like parents that have separated, and like who's going to deal with dad, which is something, you know, in my family I had to deal with. My dad left my life when I was very, very young and was very little part of it. And he pops up in my life again when he's dying, literally. And my brother takes him on in his dining room, and it's fucking insane. And you're just like, what are we doing as a family here? This estranged human being who, when you speak to the first time, you're like, you're my father, so I should recognize your voice, but it's completely unrecognizable. There's nothing there. And so, yeah, it's so unusual how this is technically an intact family we're dealing with here as well.
Yeah. And I mean, even the fact that the other piece is, as family, there's that sense of bond. Even if there's that estrangement, even if there's all those there's that thing like, you can't turn away your mom, you can't turn away your dad, you can't turn away your brother or sister. And so then there becomes this, you know, strange obligation that, you know, at some points is warranted and other points maybe isn't. And so like that brings in a whole nother series of conflicts, you know, with an individual. I mean, it's a very hard time in life, and we're moving into it. And it's a really difficult time. We're in it dealing with our parents. Sure. Well, I'm actually through it. Now my kids have to deal with my old ass. But like at the same time, it's like, you know, there are real questions, you know, around like what part of, just like in the 30s, how the social system framed this and made this an issue. And this was a political film without being political, right? Like it's dealing with the Social Security Act and, you know, all these people who suffered, who lost everything. And I love how the father, Bark, is always like, I couldn't get you a car. I couldn't get you this. I couldn't get you that. And blaming himself, right? Despite the fact he raised these 5 kids and like they all seem, like you said, intact and all the things you were like, God, as a dad, you know, you did a pretty good job, you know, but how could he blame himself for the economy, you know, completely exploding or imploding and him having no job for the last 4 years and losing his house? Like that's kind of, oh, sure. I mean, depending on how you want to look at it in the old American way, that's your fault, son. You should have worked harder.
What I was gonna say. That's the classic American way, is like to blame the person. It's an individual failing. It's never a system's failing. It's the individual's failing. And yeah, it is not a political film, but it ultimately is
Yeah.
I think, in what's crazy is McCary is an incredibly conservative Republican ultimately,
Yeah.
right? He's like a
Totally.
Ronald Reagan. You imagine like he and Ronald Reagan could have been like best friends. You know what I mean? We're like hanging out at each other's houses, though I have no story of that. And, this leads to, we're coming to the end here, and everybody's reconciling, like each family can't deal anymore. They're at a breaking point. And so back in the city, George and Anita have decided they're going to put Lucy in an old woman's home, like a retirement home. And that scene is also one of probably the most important ones, because the way it goes down is they've already spoken about it. So she knows it might be coming, and she's not really trying to deal with it. And that's a big part of this idea. It's like, how do you deal? And so what happens is she sees the letter in classic like 30s ways, like they put it right up to the screen, and we get to read the title of the
We
letter.
can even
right?
see the postmark, right?
Yeah, exactly. And she puts it down and doesn't open it. And then George does the same thing, and then they do it again. It's like, here's they do a nice super. So George has clearly read what the letter is.
They missed their intertitles from the silent era, is what that is.
Yeah, yeah. And so what's so wonderful is she lets him off the hook, right?
Oh, totally.
George has to tell her, it's like, we've made this decision as a family. And what does Lucy do? She butts in and says, no, 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 I'm going to talk first. And she says, you know what, George, I've been unhappy here. It's not your fault. So I think it would be best if I was to go with some people that are my age. And George knows it's a contrivance immediately. And he, recognizes the grace in his mother, probably for the first time in the film. And it continues, because not only is he's saying, I'm letting you off the hook, you have to let Bark off the hook. You can never, 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 nor can any of the children tell him about this. And this is where her true feelings are revealed, because through using Bark's perspective of the old person's home, it's like he would hate this. He would never allow this, so you can
Yeah.
never tell him. And so George is like devastated at the same time, relieved. And he's relieved. And then she ends with like, I just have to tell you, and it's the biggest sin of a parent, but she does
Exactly.
George, you were always my favorite. Right? And I love it. I love it.
love it too.
And George goes into the bedroom and he says, I did it, basically, to his wife. And it's like, I will forever be, grieving that I did this to her.
Yeah.
It will
This will
scar
be
me
the
for
day,
life.
right? Like
Yeah,
where this
will be
happened. You know?
Yes.
Yeah. And well acted that, because obviously he's saying that. But there is also like that moment when she says, I just want you to know, George, you were always my favorite son. Like, we have to do a whole series about favorite children, and like how that is such a, a taboo to have a favorite. And my mom of 7 would always be like, she never had a favorite, but us as kids would always be like, we know who her favorite is, or we know who his favorite was. So like the whole favorite child thing has got to be a thing. But I was like literally appalled when she said, you're my favorite. I'm like, Ma, you're not allowed to say that. Like, that's off limits.
George isn't going to tout it, so she knows he's safe. But otherwise, he could easily like throw it in their faces. And so a similar, reconciliation is happening with Bark, with Pa back in, with Cora, and they're going to send him off to California with Addie. And there's no details described. We never see her on the phone. They don't create a scene where we could do a long distance phone call or anything like that, which, the notion of how much a phone call would be, that's even brought up, back when in the conversation when Ma was talking to Bark, it's like, you could have bought yourself a good scarf for the cost of this phone call.
That's right.
You can,
yeah.
Like, you can imagine like that phone call might not even have been financially possible to call California, and it all and there's a lot of still like letter information is through the U.S. mail ultimately. And so this leads to the finish of the film, which is it is the love story, right?
It's the love story. Yeah.
Because the idea is that, Bark's going to come up to the city to catch the train, out of, whatever its Penn Station is to California. And so they're going to spend the day together. And they have 5 hours. That's it.
Yeah.
And, they're supposed to go to the kids, to Nellie's for this dinner. She's made a roast beef and she's like, oh, I bet that's nice, and it starts very sadly at first because it's basically they're walking so slowly together. They look really pathetic. Ultimately, it's kind of sad. And they're very apologetic. Like they're basically telling each other, it's my fault. It's like, what is the back at the start with the coach, back in the city with George. Wait, I got to get this. No, that's the hotel. Everybody is entitled to only so much happiness, right? That's quote
right.
From and then he responds basically, the trouble is I was a failure. And then she responds later on, I think I slipped up someplace. So they're just kind of wallowing in their misery at the start of this. And you're like, man, this is rough.
And exactly. I was like, oh no.
Yeah. But it has this switch where they run into this. They're looking at what you have already described. He's like, I wish I could have bought you cars. They're staring through this window of the shop for massive 1930s vehicles that are probably really expensive. And this car salesman incorrectly perceives them as like, you see those two out there? They're the types that have a ton of money. Yeah. And so he comes out and he introduces himself and he's like, hey, you want to go for a ride? Maybe you'll want to buy a car. He doesn't say that. And this guy becomes this impetus, and this becomes this final portrait of which is really interesting is the way other people see our parents versus how children see their parents. And it's the lack of familiarity and how important that is. And I wish as an adult of a parent, having a parent, that you wish you could like strangle sometimes because they're frustrating to you, right? You wish you could have that other perspectives quickly. Sure. and so readily, And
like
the salesman.
Remember when Didi and his mother comes in, and the other kids? There was that whole moment. That's an interesting moment. You're right.
It's the same idea, and it's like those teenage boys are like, "Dude, why are you being such a dick to your parents,
exactly,
to your mom?"
Right.
And this is happening in this film too, where you see these strangers be so wonderful and gracious, and they're interesting, they're unusual, they're not they are kind of country bumpkins, if you will, right? The way they dress, and they're technically in formal attire, but it's not modern attire, right? And so the salesman drives them all the way up and takes them to the hotel where they spent their honeymoon, and now it transitions into all these fond memories. And it's still funny because they go into this hotel and it's very different, and there's lots of comedy that happens where Ma walks in and thinks she has the arm of Bark. In fact, she has the arm of another man, and she's like, oh my goodness, and it's quite funny. And this begins this transition into they're deeply, deeply, deeply in love with one another. And you can see how tragic it is that they're forced to be apart from one another.
It's the Bogart Hotel, which I loved.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where they start to have drinks together, and the hotel manager is even nice to them and says like, oh, you were here 50 years ago? Holy cow, so wonderful to have you back. And he like buys their drinks for them, and ends up buying them dinner. And there's all these lovely lines where this is where my favorite line happens, where so after they've had their drinks, so they have some like a little, alcohol courage going in them, and they decide they're not going to go to the kids for dinner. And what is it? Bark goes to the phone booth, and he goes to call them, and Ma's outside like pushing on the door saying like, no, don't do this. We're gonna come. And he just pushes her out. He says, excuse me, young lady, this is a private conversation. I was like, man, that has to have been an improvised line. It was so wonderful. And like literally laugh out moment that he's just calling his wife a young lady, a strange young lady. Get out of here. I got to do this. You just wait there.
And this whole series, let me get your take on this. this whole last part from when they're in Central Park to when they see the bank and they see like, save now for the future. And there's that whole moment where he begins to reflect on what he didn't do. But then the salesman comes, like you said, and the salesman, even though he can't sell them the car, is super nice and is super refreshed by them. And then the hotel manager is super nice. And I'm like, what is this alternative world where people are civil and nice and everyone is great? And then they start getting drunk and they have this amazing back and forth. It's another great scene in the movie when they're drunk and you see that. And like, they start to get this courage and almost that play-like moment that started the film where you kind of came in and it was a play. It all changes. This is like an interesting series of montages where it ends with them going into this luxurious 30s hotel. They have a great dinner and then they start dancing. And it's at this scene where it almost seems almost surreal, where the band keeper, band leader starts to move from to a rumba, sees that they are like, fish out of water, and says, to the band, no, let's go back to the waltz. And it's as if now they're back within society, and they started so small on that dance floor, and by the end of the dance, they've become almost whole again. Part of the world again, and people have recognized them. They are in love as they've ever been 50 years ago. I mean, it's this amazing moment that built up in what I think is just a really amazing sequence in the film. So different from anything that came before it. In my mind, it's part of that, I think it's, maybe he's not known for his filmmaking, but there's something about that final sequence that is just amazing and different from everything that came before it. And then we get to the final moment, which is what makes this final moment so devastating, right? We have gone up this crescendo of love and connection and respiriting. And I don't know if you've ever been apart from your partner for a long time, but there have been like 3 weeks, a month, even sometimes more, where me and Antonella, for various reasons, had to been apart. And that connection is always a little tricky when you come back, because it's almost like you're learning each other again and you're trying to figure each other out and you're kind of reconnecting, and you have some of those things. But, that stuff is not just learned, right? It's earned by being together and living together and going through these things together. And this whole scene is like they're reconnecting for the first time. It's like a first date. It's so amazing. And then
it's their honeymoon again. It's their second honeymoon. Ultimately.
It's true. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And there's just other wonderful things, like they're in the courage. I love like they're having their courage and they're sitting at dinner with the hotel manager and they're just chatting away. And some of it's super awkward because they're like fighting about dates of like when they went to the aquarium versus when they went.
Thursday.
And it's just, they're still like just not they're just still old people, right?
But the manager never gives that look, like rolls his eyes off campus or off camera, or like basically is like, or even the auto salesman who you thought was going to be like, those fucking old people. But no one's like that. Everybody's nice.
No, and that's like basically the McCary message here. It's like you only get one shot to be nice to other human beings. And there's all these still great moments. It's like he's telling the story basically to the manager, like how they lost their house. So he's like, and he mentions the banker who was introduced earlier in the film, in like kind of the beginning of the film, and he's talking to George. It's like Randy Dublock, the banker. He was wearing a kimono. Weird, it's like, but he was nice, like he's trying to like set him aside. But the reason he's doing this is he describes like he was in competition for Lucy, right? They were both courting Lucy at the same time, and at the very end, with the manager, is like, I got his girl, but he got my house,
Yeah, that's a great line. And there's another moment within there. So there's the moment you talked about when he's in the phone booth. But before that, there's a moment where, the manager is like, well, at least you have your 5 kids. I'm sure that gives you a certain amount of pleasure. And the dad is like, well, I'm not sure about that, which is so real. right? Like, I am sure, like, no one wants to say that. Everyone's like, yes, my kids, they're the fucking best. They fill me up with all sorts. Where he's like, no, I'm not sure. And then he later gets on the phone, not too far, the next scene, gets on the phone. That's when he says, excuse me, young lady, I need to talk with this. And he curses out his daughter. He basically, and you don't hear it, and that's why, and that's the beautiful part of this scene.
They literally do this, like, where he goes and he whispers, and we don't know what he says. There's no subtitles.
And you get a sense that it's pretty prime. You know, he's basically telling them how he feels, and it's probably pretty raw. Hence, they can't listen to it. And you see the daughter on the other end of the phone, like, "Oh my God!"
Yeah.
And he basically says, "This is our last night together for who knows where. We don't want to see you kids at all," which I think is like one of the more radical moments in the movie, where he's basically like, fuck you kids. You know what? You've been nothing but a pain in our ass. We're going, and we're going to have our own time. And that's part of that crescendo of that relationship moment, which I think is so great.
Yeah, it is phenomenal. And it's great because they also tease us with a brief scene with the four siblings together. And, you know, Robert's like, boy, don't we suck. You know, and George is like, yep, because he's like, but where are they? We should go to the train. And it's like, when is the train leaving? And George is like, in 2 minutes. And they're like, what? They're going to think we're terrible. It's like, yep, we are. And I thought it's true. George is like, he's like reconciled the fact that it's like they deserve to not have us there, you know?
Yeah.
And it is this really, you know, melancholic moment. This is where there wasn't a clear eye in the house when they're forced to say their goodbye. They're like likely forever goodbyes. They're admitting to one another, we're saying our forever goodbyes. And as we've already described, there'll probably be many, many letters exchanged, you know, like it's kind of like out of colonial times. And like, I think of like the John Adams, Abigail Adams letters, you know, that were in the what was the popular nonfiction book that was it McCourt wrote or something like that? I can't remember. Anyway.
The one called Adams.
Yeah. And it's like the intimacy will still be there in writing, but they'll never hear each other's voices most likely again, you know, and they'll never touch one another again. And, you know, and there's these references, there's like a popular culture reference to Mrs. Breckenridge. I don't know what that means. You know, it's like and she's like, oh, thank you. That's the nicest thing you've ever said. And, you know, they're telling each other, I couldn't imagine my life without you, basically. And he gets on the train and she literally runs after him as the train pulls away, and that's it. She's left alone and movie's over.
Yeah. And
that's what we're left with.
It's true. And, you know, and it leaves it open. Like, obviously, you know it, but like, you know, they're separated now for a significant amount of time. And it's that scene before of them in that 5 hours, you know, really reconnecting and rekindling and like they're in love, right? Like there is that sense, like there's this amazing love between these two people, and because of circumstances, because of situation, because there's no goddamn social security and social net, right? These two people are forced to go separate ways when they shouldn't be. And gosh, what an amazing film.
No, so first one of this kind of series. And Jim, right before we go, say 99. Just say it. Say 99.
Why do I have to say 99?
Say 99.
You young whippersnapper telling me what to do. Look at my white hair. I shouldn't have to listen to you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.